With some species, you do have to be careful with pruning certain roots. Sometimes some trees develop a taproot, basically a really large root that grows out of the bottom, usually towards the middle. And if you cut that off, it may be fatal to the tree. It just depends on it so much. Japanese maples don't have a big taproot like that. Their root system tends to be nice and kind of small and fibrous and fairly easy to work with. And again, I'm not looking for a particular goal here. There isn't really a point when I know I'm done with this. I'm just pulling out some of the biggest roots, the longest ones, so that I can encourage smaller roots to grow in their place. At least that's the goal. At the same time you're doing this, you can also try to remove any weeds, also dead roots that you see. So you can tell a dead root because it's going to look brown, and you probably can't tell, but this is just sort of a small dead root, and there's lots of small dead roots, especially on the surface, because the tree dries out, and then the surface roots die fairly easily. Whereas you've got, lots of these live roots, you can see because they're light colored over here. So removing dead roots is a good idea because, of course, dead roots are taking up space, and it's always possible that might invite an infection of some sort if you've got a lot of dead roots. So I've cleared out some of the old soil as I've been trimming, and there's a reason for that too. I'm trying to knock out some of the old soil because soil breaks down. You can use all kinds of different soils to plant your bonsai in. There are better soils for different plants, and we can get into that. But your tree will generally live in just about any soil that you give it, as long as it gets water. Now, will it do as best as it possibly could? Probably not, but it'll do just fine. And soil over time breaks down, so it decomposes. It gets smaller and smaller. The pieces get smaller and smaller, and one of the effects of that is that it may cause the soil to retain more moisture than you really want it to. It'll absorb more water, hold on to it more, and that may cause root rot in your tree. And your trees are small; they only have little mounds of roots here. They don't have a lot to spare. So if your roots start dying back, that may be the end of your tree, and that's why you want to be real careful about protecting your roots. And so generally speaking, you're going to read that the soil you want to put your bonsai plant in should be really well draining. It shouldn't retain a lot of water. That means you're going to probably need to water your tree more often because it's not retaining as much moisture, but it also means that you're going to be less likely to cause root rot in your tree accidentally. So moving on, we're going to plant this into its old pot, but I'm going to give it some new soil. And the soil that I'm going to switch to, right now you can tell that what's on the tree right now is sort of a standard garden soil. It's got some extra sand in it to help with drainage, but there's nothing particularly special about it. I'm going to switch to something called an inorganic soil, and I'm going to show you what I mean in just a second here. So I'm going to set this down. Okay, so here's a sample of what I'm going to be working with here. This is an inorganic soil. Meaning that it doesn't have dirt in it. What it has is different kinds of rocks and clays. It may have some pieces of bark in it, but it's not a the kind of soil that you would pull out of the ground, is it? And the advantage of this is that it's very well draining. It doesn't hold on to moisture nearly as much, and so will prevent root rot. Also, the shape of the little pieces is kind of critical. You're probably not going to be able to see real well, but all of these little pieces of rock and stuff are not particularly smooth. These aren't like river pebbles or something like that. they're rough and they've got lots of little pits in them, and they're chipped and stuff. And that provides nice little corners and holes for the tree to attach its roots to, as well as little pockets for air to hang out. And remember that roots need air, not just water, in order to grow and thrive. So this helps to keep the soil not super wet, as well as having plenty of oxygen for the roots, and gives it a nice anchor for the roots to cling on to. So that's what I'm going to fill into the pot and fill around the base of the roots, and we'll see how it works out. Okay, so here we are back at our pot. We've got our mesh down at the bottom again, right? And then we're going to put our tree in. Now, what I could do is I could spend a fair amount of time trying to remove all of the old soil and get rid of as much of it as I could by, maybe taking a hose and trying to wash out all the old soil as much as possible. I want to make sure that there's some of the old soil left on the roots, because the old soil has some healthy stuff in it too. It has some healthy bacteria in it that will help to promote root growth. And I want to get rid of all that healthy bacteria. So I'm not going to get rid of all the dirt on this tree here. I'm going to try to knock off some of the dirt so that there's more space for the new soil, but I don't want to get rid of all of it. Okay, and now I'm going to start putting the new soil into the pot. We're going to start by putting a little layer on the bottom. And this mix is a combination of akadama and pumice and lava, as well as a couple other things like charcoal in it as well. So this is a mix that I bought. You can make your own mix if you're really into this kind of thing. Lots of people do. Or you can buy your own pre-made mix. So I put down a layer, and then what I'm going to try to do is I'm just going to try to work in this new soil all around the edges. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that it gets into all the holes and crevices that we created when we were knocking the old dirt off of it. We don't want any large air pockets under the root ball, because roots aren't going to grow there. So I'm sort of using my fingers to feel underneath the root ball as best I can and push the new soil into every crevice that I can sort of find. Another technique that's real commonly done is that people will take a pair of chopsticks and use the chopsticks to kind of poke around, use the chopsticks to poke out old dirt, as well as to poke new soil into all the nooks and crannies and spaces. Okay. And after we're done, we'll water it real thoroughly, and that will also help to get the root, to get the dirt to spaces that there might still be exposed holes and stuff. Now I'm just gonna set my little pieces of moss here. They're kind of dried out right now, so they're kind of hard to work with. They're easier to work with when they're wet. Okay, that's where we're at. So, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to water my tree. Actually, before that, I'm going to make sure that it's sitting at the right angle that I want it to. And as I'm looking at it, actually, so I was not paying as close attention as I should have. I feel like it's off a little bit. It's angled a little bit too far to the right. It's a little unbalanced. So the question is, how much effort do I want to put in and try to straightening it out again? And I think it's off enough, and I'm having a hard time kind of getting it back at the angle that I want, that I'm actually going to undo with some of what I just did. So I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to remove some of the soil that we just put into the bottom. And hopefully when I'm done, this will be at a better level. That looks better to me. I'm going to hold it where I want it right now with my hand, with one hand, and with my other hand I'm going to put the new soil back into place. That looks pretty nice. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to water it. Now all I'm using to water this tree is I'm just using a normal garden hose. You know, you can easily buy real expensive watering cans and things that are supposed to be designed for bonsai. You can go that way if you want to. I prefer the cheaper way. This allows me to put out a pretty fine spray that isn't too forceful, that doesn't knock off all the soil that I just put down. And I'm just going to give it a gentle spray a few times over. You'll notice that the water isn't overflowing because we put a lot of inorganic soil into it, so it drains really well now. So that water will also help to push the soil into little holes that I may have left behind without realizing it. Oh, look at that. There's even a little worm that came along for the ride. Right there's a little worm. I'm going to leave him right where he's at because he seems to be happy there, and obviously we like worms. Worms are our friends. Worms create fertilizer, and they also dig holes in the soil, which help provide spaces for air. So, put a little bit of our moss back. Just going to hose that down a little bit. It'll perk up and look better in a couple days. So that's pretty much all I'm going to do with this. At this point, I'm pretty much done. Now, what I might do is keep it out of the bright sun like it's in right now. I might keep it in a shadier spot for a few days as it adapts, because you know the root pruning can be stressful for a tree and the repotting process. So I won't touch these roots again until at least next year, and next spring, you know, all I'll do is focus on possibly pruning the leaves. So here's our tree one last time, and it's looking pretty good. It's happy in its nice new pot. We did a real quick pruning and repotting job, and if it's not perfect, that's okay. From my perspective, this is good enough, and I'm confident that over the next year that it will continue to do well and thrive and continue to look as happy as it does now. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something from it. And if you have any questions about anything I did or didn't do, and are just curious about what I did and I didn't explain it well enough, please ask me. All right, bye.